Chances are, if your guitar sounds like that, that's probably why you're watching this video right now. So when you are tuning your guitar, pay attention to what string you are tuning. So it's pretty obvious to note that, this low E string, you follow it all the way up here, it's going to be this peg. So your high E string, you follow it all the way, and it's going to be this peg. That's pretty obvious to point out, between your two E's here. But say you're somewhere in the middle, like you're trying to tune the G string, but it's very easy to make this mistake. It doesn't matter how long you've been playing guitar. Anybody can make this mistake if they're not paying attention. So you're tuning and nothing is happening because you're actually trying to tune the wrong string. You're trying to tune the G string, but you're turning the D string. So pay attention, just make note of what string you're tuning, and say count them down, the third or fourth string down, however you need to reference that. Make sure that matches to here, whichever string you're going here, and just simply follow that to the tuning peg. Now it's pretty easy to follow the line down that when you have an inline 6 in a row machine head style headstock. But if you have a 2-course headstock like a Gibson style, then you'll just have to keep note of what side of the headstock that string is going to, because it is definitely easy to overlook and make a mistake. Now the thing about that is, it may not sound like a big deal that you're tuning the wrong string, but what can happen is, if you aren't paying attention and you are over tightening a string and you don't realize it, you could easily break that string. Now breaking a string is definitely an inconvenience, but more importantly so, it can actually be a bit of a safety hazard, because there is no way to predict where a string will fly when it breaks apart. Now with that being said, I've actually had friends tell me stories about a string breaking and coming pretty close to their face. Or I actually had a friend tell me that one time a string popped him right in the lip and it actually was bleeding. So he was thankful that it didn't go any higher, because just think about that for a moment, where if a string pops, the last thing you want to do is end up going to the ER and having to get stitches in your eye because you weren't paying attention to what string you were tuning. So that can easily be prevented. Now strings can sometimes break from age, under pressure, sometimes other factors can come into play that can break strings, but you can easily try to avoid any sort of potential hazard or accident by simply paying attention to what you're doing. So if you're tuning a string and it's not moving, you're probably on the wrong string. So there are a number of ways that we can tune our guitar, and the first one we're going to go over is using tones. So we could take something like this tuner here. It has a really irritating A440 tone. So we can hear that. I'm going to actually use tones for this demonstration. So that's the first thing we're going to use. So if we have A440 again, we can hear that that is relatively in tune. However, if we were to tune this slightly flat, you hear that warbly effect that it has. That's the frequencies not matching up. So you're trying to match the frequencies of the tone. Let's try it again. So there we hear, if we go below or above the note, we're actually getting a lot of that frequency overlap where we're getting the warbly effect. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to slightly detune these a little bit for this next example. We're just going to use a tone for each string. So E, A, D, G, B, E. We're going to use a tone for each. Let's start with E. Now A. Now D. G. B. And high E. So we can hear with the tone of each one how that can match up. Now, the other method that we can use to tune to tones is we can use harmonics. And the harmonics, we are going to use the 5th fret harmonic of each string. So you can use the 12th, but it's better to use the 5th. So let's go ahead. So as you can hear, those more closely match in tone. So one way you can tune the guitar is to tune it to itself. Now, this can be helpful if you're playing alone and you just kind of want to get the guitar in tune, but it's not going to be as practical in a band practice setting or playing with other people because you all want to be exactly in tune with each other, preferably to a tuner. And this is just a method, though. This is a great like bedroom or practice method. And if you remember from our notes of the fretboard lesson, if you watched that one, if you haven't, go check that out. But if you remember from that lesson, the 5th fret of basically any string except for the G string is the next open string. So if we're on the 5th fret of our E string, that's an A. The 5th fret of the A is a D. 5th fret of the D is a G. 4th fret of the G is our B. And the 5th fret of the B is the E. So we can simply just go down the line. We hear that those are all in tune. However, if we were to, say, down tune one, now we hear that it's back in tune. So if you notice, though, when I check these notes, I had to cross over with my picking hand to actually tune. The reason being is because you want to tune on, if you're tuning on the fly like that, you want to be able to hear what you're doing. So that's one drawback of that if you look at it that way. And another way that we can actually tune our guitar to itself is using harmonics. So we use the 5th fret of the string that we're on and the 7th fret of the string above it. So 5th fret of the E string, 7th fret of the A string, those are the same harmonic. Now, if we were to drop that A string again, now we hear those are the same note. So we can do this with between the E and the A string. Then we can move to the A and the D string. We can do the D and the G. And when we go to the G and the B, it's going to be a little trickier. Because they're not exactly tuned the same. They're going to be, they might be slightly off from each other, especially depending on the intonation of your guitar. And we go between our B string and our high E. And then we can even check that by the 5th fret of our E and our high E. So 5th fret of our low E on the harmonic, check it against the high E string. So E and the A and the D, the D and the G, the E harmonic of the low E, the high E string, and then the harmonics between B string and the E string. So that's another way that you can tune your guitar. And we hear that it sounds in tune. Now, a good starting point would be to use a harmonic if you were going to use this method. So, say we are going to start from our A440 again, and we're going to tune the guitar to that. So we hear that's in tune. Now we're tuning between the E and the A. Now the A and the D. D and the G. E harmonic and the high E. And the B and the E. So again, everything is in tune. So that is another method that you can use. So if you have a tuner, great, awesome. But if you don't, you can get a few things. You have options. You can get something like one of these, just simple chromatic tuners, and it has, an option to plug it in. If you look, it has an option where it has a mic where it can pick up. But if you're in a noisy area, it probably will not work as well for you. This one actually even has an output on it to where if you wanted to go through an amp or into recording software or whatever, you just wanted to have a tuner in place. It's cool. Something like this can fit in a guitar case. It's easy, and you can order it from like anywhere. Probably Amazon, Guitar Center, Sam Ash, AMS, Musician's Friend, Sweetwater. There's a ton of places that you can get something like that from, and they're usually not that terribly expensive. If you don't want to wait for shipping and you want to get something that's a cheaper option, you can get just a phone app, something like the Boss Chromatic Tuner app, and it's pretty close to the actual thing itself. I've had this pedal for a very, very, very long time, and it's never failed me. So, this works pretty much the same way. It just uses your phone's mic, and this is just a guitar pedal. So another thing you can get is something like one of these headstock tuners. They're pretty nifty. They can usually rotate around, and they come with a clamp that actually sits on your headstock. Let's take a look at an example here. So if you have this, for example, you can see everything in here, and then you hit your string, and when it lights up green, you know it's in tune. And if it doesn't light up green, then it has a little arrow and everything to adjust. So that's it. That's the basic principle of it. And this thing is small enough to where it could fit in a guitar case or anywhere convenient too. So you have plenty of options out there as far as tuners go. So let's go ahead and tune that up. I'm just going to use the tuner, plug-in tuner that's in my recording program, just to get this going. So the idea is you want to get it to center. Your lowest string is your 6th string, and it's called E. Your next string is your A string, that's your 5th string. So you want to get that to A, because we're just tuning to standard. D is your 4th string. G is your 3rd string. And when you do this, you notice how I'm not digging into the string. You just kind of want to lightly graze the string. Your 2nd string is B, and your top string or your 1st string is E, your high string. Sometimes you'll just call it high E. And you'll want to go ahead and recheck everything, because strings hold a lot of tension, and this is just a solid piece of wood here. So it's a balancing act. So you're going to have to probably account for any sort of movement and adjust the strings. But, hopefully it shouldn't go too far out of whack. So those are, pretty much on point. So let's hear how that sounds again. Much better. And it's important to note that you're going to want to tune to 440 hertz, because that's the industry standard, and that's what most everything else is tuned to. Some people have conspiracy theories about 432 and all sorts of other things, and I'm no expert on any of that, but everybody pretty much just tunes to 440. You have the option to. And most things actually have things like, this chromatic tuner. It actually has option to, you have a tune for A440. And same thing on this, this app as well. It has a tuning fork on it where it's got, the same thing. If we put them together, same principle.